Right. Well, I wanted to welcome you to our first podcast series here for Beyond the Watt. On the video, we have Felicia, and we have Tony, and we have Benjamin. And we really wanted to use this opportunity just to do an introductory podcast and kind of talk about some high level issues within the industry that, we're trying to solve as, Smarter Building Technologies Alliance. So we wanted to take the time for this episode to really look at energy efficiency and connected lighting and when does it matter, when does it not matter, and how do we make sense of all the stuff and developments that are happening in the industry so rapidly. So we're just going to kind of have a free flowing conversation and see where it goes. And hopefully we're going to be able to pull out some tidbits of information that you find useful and then you can put to practice right away in your businesses, starting tomorrow. But I wanted to start the conversation really just around the topic of energy efficiency and energy efficiency sales and projects and how they've changed over the last 5 years, never mind 10 years. And I know you, Benjamin, you have a ton of experience on all sides of the channels, from being a contractor, putting projects together, to a controls manufacturer, to so forth and so on. So I'm curious, like, I mean, what do you? Where is this industry? Where's it going? And what's going on with energy efficiency projects?
Yeah, I mean, we've spent the first 35 to 40 years of retrofit, which retrofit really began in the early 80s, which was really a move from T12, like a 40-watt T12 lamp, to a 34-watt T12 lamp. I mean, that was the beginning. A couple guys realized they could put some aluminum reflectors behind a fluorescent lamp, and they could take some of the lamps out of the fixture. And we see that today. You look inside of a fixture and you see some really shiny aluminum up there, and a couple lamps. So there probably was twice as many lamps there before. And then the retrofit boom happened, and that's where it all began. And the idea of being able to put an occupancy sensor in a room was at first a little novel. You would see it in like presidents' offices and things like that. It was almost like a status symbol. I have something trick in my office. I don't think people realize that it was actually saving energy. And of course, you could never really quantify it, right? So even if you put an aux sensor in a room to turn the lights off, there was no real way for you to prove that it actually saved energy. I mean, I think we've all done this. I've driven around downtown LA or downtown wherever, Dallas. I can think of all sorts of times where I've driven around areas of town that the building was clearly unoccupied and the whole building was on. And you're going, wait a minute. I actually installed the sensors in that building 15 years ago. I know there's aux sensors in there. Why are none of them off, right? And there could be a whole slew of reasons. The janitor or the facilities guy could have come through and set all the delays to like an hour. And what do you know? In the building, security guy walks every floor every 2 hours. So at some point, all the lights are getting triggered throughout the night, and they just never end up going off. So there's those types of things that I think have really put a little bit of some negative perception about occupancy sensors. That, and as light fixtures get more and more efficient, the big question, well, if I'm using 1 watt or 2 watts or less watts, why do I need to worry about turning them off? If I'm not using as much energy, turning them off isn't as valuable to me as it was when I was using a lot of energy. Turning off a 100-watt fixture versus a 5-watt fixture is a totally different savings number. And if it costs me the same amount, I'm not going to worry about turning off the 5-watt fixture. I'm going to worry about turning off the 100-watt fixture. So these are some of the dynamics that have really hurt occupancy sensors over the years. And then enter advanced controls. And
Benjamin, sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
Sorry, a quick question. Coming from somebody who is new to the lighting industry, what would you say the differences between local control and connected control when you talk about occupancy sensors?
Yeah, because I'll say things like advanced controls, and people go, what is that? And really, what is that anyways? Advanced, right? I think that's just it's a way for us to say it's better than non-advanced. We've all been wondering what the term is for, and local, I think, is sometimes what we use for just an isolated, hardwired occupancy sensor that's in a room that that's controlling the lights that it's wired to, right? There's no way for you to log into some kind of software program to make some adjustments to it. If you want the delay for the timeout, how long do you want the lights to stay on after you leave the room? That you got to go in with a screwdriver and set it on the actual device. That's what local control is. Advanced controls, wireless controls, network controls, those types of terms are kind of what we're dealing with nowadays. And that's where a device is connected to a network, whether it's low voltage connected or whether it's connected through a wireless network. And then you have access through some kind of software program to be able to see what's actually happening. Is it turning the lights off? What's the delay? Can I shorten the delay? Should I shorten it during certain times of the day? So that's what people are calling advanced controls. And I think it's just anything that's beyond that original control of setting it with a little dip switch, at the actual device.
Right.
So
I would add a little bit to that and say that since everything we look at is kind of talking about IoT, which we'll probably get to, when I think of advanced controls, I always have to think of advanced network controls, because having the word networked in there means that all the devices are on a network and they're uniquely identifiable. Whereas if you just say connected advanced controls, two lights can be connected, or a light and a sensor could be connected, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're networked. Okay. So I like to keep that clear. A network of controls is every device is uniquely identifiable.
Right. And then, so meaning like, you're on a floor, 10 offices, every single one of those lights is connected to a network, right? And it's addressable through the software, like you were saying, Benjamin, right? So how does that play into energy efficiency, and does it help that? Does it not help that, right? So like, I mean, I grew up in the energy efficiency field, quote unquote, taking incandescent lights and, putting in fluorescent, and, you saved watts. That was the whole name of the game of energy efficiency. How these advanced controls, network controls, is that a driving force for energy efficiency, or vice versa, or how's that playing out?
Yeah, and I'll start by saying that advanced controls, network controls, software-based control. I've been like saying software-based controls these days, because you can actually create a wireless network that in and of itself doesn't end up having access through software. There are control systems out there that are wireless. They all connect to each other, but out in the field, you use a remote to set them. It's almost like all you did was take away the screwdriver, really, at the end of the day, and maybe increase a few of the control points. You can, maybe set a schedule in the device, those types of things. But then you still walk away from it and you don't have any visibility into it. But when we have software-based controls, now you can get in and you can actually analyze what's happening in the system, and you can see, I'm not saving any energy because these aren't turning off, and what can I do to actually save the energy? So now we can not only verify that the energy savings has happened, which I think is kind of like, that's the big step forward, the giant leap forward, is that now we can actually prove it is saving something. But then further that, we can continue to work on it and fine tune it. Now, does that happen? Not if there isn't someone looking at it. Right. So just putting these things in and walking away from them doesn't mean that you're saving the maximum amount of energy. So you need somebody there looking at the system, watching how it's performing, making some changes, some adjustments, and honestly, you need to do that forever. Over time, the way that the space gets used changes, and people will go out and fiddle with devices, and they'll end up not working right, and you will catch that in the software. But so over time, so you install the system, you keep it up to date, you keep it tuned, and you're essentially taking that initial savings that you got from going to LED, which is probably 50%, and you're going to jack that up to maybe 80, 90, 95%, and that's kWh, right? And there's these huge kind of gaps in knowledge about or maybe taking some legacy thinking and not applying what's happening today in the industry to these advanced controls versus maybe how we approached it years ago. Saying I'm going to save 95% kWh does not mean I'm going to save 95% dollars on the project.
Right.
Because kWh isn't always how you're paying for your energy. And so in a lot of states, you're paying as much for kW, which is the demand, and we'll probably have a whole other podcast just based on how energy is billed for, and to really go into that so that we can, intelligently look at how to save actual dollars. But reducing kWh, that's a function of time, how many hours I'm using a certain amount of kilowatts. But kW, if I turned on once a month, my entire facility, all my AC went on, all of my lights went on, all of my machinery went on, my computers, everybody was charging their phones, and I turned all that on and ran that for 1 hour, that wouldn't be the kWh wouldn't be very high, but the kW would be through the roof, and my bill would reflect that. It would be a lot just for that 1 hour that I use that kW. It would spike, and that's how the utility charges for kW. They just look 15-minute photo shots, snapshots of your kW, and they take the highest one that they get through the month. So, anyways, having said all of that, you get energy savings from the lighting. But I think where we want to, what we're really talking about here is IoT, right? So yeah, I got 95% kWh savings from the lighting, but lighting might be 20% of your bill. It might be 40% of your bill, might be 50% of your bill. But if you've got air conditioning, if you got machinery, if you got the other types of draws, there's a lot in that building that you're not even considering by putting this lighting system in. And if your building was retrofit prior, you might only be saving 20% of your bill or 10. So
why is that? I guess that's what I'm trying to understand there. So like I was making the analogy before, incandescent to fluorescent, right? I'm an electrical contractor. I'm in the energy efficiency field, and I'm saving my clients money by saving them kilowatts, right? You had mentioned that we can save even more. How are we saving even more through network controls? And is that the driving factor for electrical contractors to go out there and sell these network systems? And then I want to kind of jump into the conversation with you, Tony, about this whole IoT stuff that you mentioned, Benjamin. But I just wanted to understand that a little more.
Yeah. So I mean, look at a building. Through the last 20 or 30 years, people have been nipping away at the low-hanging fruit, and lighting consistently becomes the low-hanging fruit. So they took their T12s from 40 watt to 34 watt back in the 80s, and they took those 34 watters and they took them to T8s in the 90s, and then they delamped those T8s. Maybe they went to T5s or something like that. And so they've consistently done the lighting. But their air compressor is old and ancient and inefficient. The machinery's inefficient. They've got leaks throughout all the lines. They've got an AC system that's at the end of its life that they continue to just push to the back burner because it doesn't have the same kind of payback, and it's really expensive. So you have this pie chart of how much of your energy is lighting, and it keeps shrinking, the lighting portion. So now here we are, I'm going into a building that's got fixtures that had already been retrofit 4 times, and now I'm grabbing the last little bit, and I'm going to reduce that by 95%, but still the giant part of the pie isn't getting addressed again. So the IoT portion is what is important in this networked controls. And if a contractor goes in and just tries to eke out that last bit of lighting savings and doesn't realize what else is in that they can do with this network solution, they're missing the whole point, right? You can do so much with IoT, and I think that's where these discussions need to go from here. Is what else can we do with a lighting-based wireless network? You can put a Zigbee network in and Tony, you can talk about the different wireless technologies and the types of systems that are out there, and the type of stuff that we can control on these networks. I think that's our jumping point.
Absolutely. So mentioning IoT, Tony, when and where does that make sense?
Well, before I get into that, I always like to look back at where we've come from before, and then where we are and where we're going. So if I look back and, like we were saying earlier, we started with lights, and then we had controllable lights with line voltage, aux sensors, line voltage switches. Then we moved to low voltage control. Then we moved to wireless control, and now we're at networked control. And the next thing now is taking that network and connecting it to the internet, which is now where we have IoT, right? So that's kind of the where we're from, where we are, and where we're going. And with the Internet of Things, I do some research, and we hear these terms all the time and definitions. There's a lot of definitions for it from many different companies and people, and the definition that I come up with to keep it simple is the network of physical objects that contain hardware and software to communicate and sense or interact with their internal and external environments.
So what does that mean?
Yes, so all that means, if we think about it, is it's a sensor that has software and hardware, and it can sense its external environment, and it has internal algorithms to react from that, and then it is connected to a network. Right, that's it. If you think of a sensor, think of a thermostat, think of a water flow meter. I mean, anything. Those are all the things that are on the IoT network. So now, when you look at that and you think of what can you do, well, I mean, really, the sky's the limit, right? It's just like the cell phone that we always talk about, where in the beginning it was to make phone calls. Then BlackBerry started text messaging and emailing, and then Apple comes in, and then now there's apps. We're at the point right now where app development for the IoT is ready, because the infrastructure is there, and now we can control and monitor all the physical objects that we want to, and that we can bring on the networks.
Okay, so you talked about how to, needing to maintain a controlled area. How do you maintain software?
Well, the good thing about networks control systems is the ability to have remote access and the ability to upgrade firmware, update software, and basically have full control of that device throughout its life expectancy, and actually keep it lasting longer, because the fact that you can update firmware and software remotely makes it really easy to fix bugs and add new features.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So one of the questions that I had, based on, this whole concept of IoT and connected lighting, and, the entry point is energy efficiency, driving more savings, and doing all of that. But, if I'm a contractor, right, and I have a lot of family members that they're contractors, and they have no idea, about any of this stuff, right? And that's kind of the point of this podcast, is to kind of help shed light on some of that. But so what are these guys speccing or selling or installing? Is it a complete system? Is it a, because you look at something like Nlight as a system, right? That's a something that they can sell, they can put their hands around. But IoT, it sounds like it's incredibly vast. It could be anything. What are they selling? What are they installing? How does it make sense for a contractor?
There are some I think the residential market has actually led the way around IoT and around AV, the advancement of audio visual, and all of our TVs and our sound systems, with Sonos, and then we have wireless speakers, and out of that has developed quite a network of residential systems integrators that have realized that the way for them to win is by going in and sitting down with the resident, the owner of the house, and really mapping everything out with them, and looking at like their entire home as a living organism, and what are your needs? What would you like to get out of this? Because man, we could do anything, right? I could put smart curtains on in your house. I could put your refrigerator on this. I could pipe music through every single room in your house. I can control the temperature in every room in the house. Like, how far do you want to go with it, right? And what are your goals? And I think that that type of person. So they're not the same as a contractor. They're a different they're a different breed. They've kind of tried to separate themselves from a contractor and have become more of a consultant, right?
Do you mean like
So
Alexa Home or Google Home type of thing?
well, that would be the foundation, but I'm actually talking
Mhm.
about the person who comes to your house and talks you through how to build that network out in
Got
your
it.
in your home. And so I wouldn't hire that because my house isn't that big, and I'm from this world, and so I do the research and I figure out what I want. But if I had like a 5,000, if I was a the higher echelon homeowner in a 5,000 square foot house and I really wanted to deck it out, I'd pay a few grand and have a consultant come in and tell me how to do this, right? So that's what is really missing from the commercial industry. So folks that can come out and truly understand a networked solution for your building that will be able to connect anything that you want. But I have to know as that consultant, I need to know what it is that can actually, what I can use from the industry, the types of technologies, the types of systems, the types of wireless standards or hardware or software and how they interact and that kind of. I have to have a great knowledge of that so that when I sit down in your building and I look around and I say, you've got that type of machine, you've got that type of light, you got that type of AC, and let me look at your bill, and to be able to take all of those variables together and say, let's build out this solution, right? That's what's not happening today. Today, we're still approaching the industry like we did 30, 40 years ago, which is I'm going to come in and I'm going to put new lights in here. And I'm going to get you a rebate and a payback and boom, and I'm out of here. No one's looking at the building as an entire. Now, there are entities that have been doing that for years. They're called ESCOs. They go into public style projects like universities or schools or hospitals, and they'll go, or government facilities, and they'll try to do a list, a menu of things. They'll replace the boiler, they'll replace the chiller, they'll upgrade the BMS, but still none of that is IoT based. That's a fixed menu that hasn't adapted either. So again, there's still room for someone to come in and sit down with a customer and really look at the building holistically and say, well, how can we leverage this wireless network? And that's where the big saving comes in, because remember, we have this shrinking piece of the pie, which is lighting, and everything else then is much larger. So if I can now, if I've got 100% of a pie and I've only got, only 10% of that is lighting now, I've got this 90% chunk over here that's probably bleeding. There's probably some serious hemorrhaging going on that I could leverage the IoT network for. I could start putting their machinery on the network, their air compressors, their AC, their, plug load and everything else, and maybe take that 90% and cut that down by 50%, which would be a huge savings, right?
Mhm.
LED, 50% of your lighting, which may only be 20% of your bill. The rest of the IoT, maybe 50% of 90% of your bill. Now we're talking, but that's a tall order, right?
Well,
And
I would just add to that and just throw this out there to you, Benjamin, because I'm with you, and I remember way back in the early days when we first started doing this, and when you explain wireless mesh networks and IP addresses and all that to contractors and electricians, it's like they didn't know what was going on. But if we think about it, and we look at those past many years, and I think of today, I would think that there are more electricians and contractors who are more in tune and more excited about these things just because of this. How many people have the Ring, right? How many people have an IoT thermostat? How many people have Google Home and Alexa? So they can kind of see the value of IoT, right? So we just need to, of course, it's a lot harder to bring that into the commercial space, but at least now there are things out there that make these consumers more, knowledgeable about what's going on.
Right. So I guess that I was just going to comment on that like Felicia was saying, the Amazon Alexa, the Google Home for the residential, like that's the solution for residential. using that as a construct, that's what we're talking about for commercial buildings and network lighting and IoT and all this other kind of stuff, right? It's this platform that lets a client do all the cool things that the Amazon Alexa can do at home, which is actually pretty cool. But you were going to say something, Benjamin?
But Google hasn't done that for commercial, right?
Oh, no, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I
But
just
if
meant
they
as
did,
like a context, to wrap your head around. Okay, I can understand. I can ask my Alexa to turn on my Philips Hue light bulb in the garage,
Yeah.
using that same kind of thinking. In a
On a
commercial
smaller
building, I
scale.
have to
Yeah.
log into my app and change conference room C to whatever mood lighting needs to be set or something like that.
yeah, what I'm going to say is, what if they did, right? I mean, look, it didn't take, you didn't have to twist my arm to put Echo in my house.
Mhm.
I buy everything through Amazon. I
Mm.
mean, it is a trusted commodity in my world, right? Apple, Microsoft, these are the companies that are going after the residential market. When you go to commercial, you have Daintree, you have Enlighted. Nobody knows who they. I mean, they don't have that same kind of brand recognition. What they're bringing to the table is a little more abstract. They're by companies that don't necessarily completely understand what they're actually trying to accomplish. I mean, there were a lot of times I've worked for a lot of different advanced controls companies. I've consulted for a lot of different advanced controls companies. There've been a lot of times where I've sat in meetings with developers, and they've said, a lot of this technology came technology first. It didn't come value first, right? So people didn't create a Zigbee network to have advanced wireless lighting controls. It came first, and then somebody thought, "Hey, I could put a Zigbee in an occupancy sensor." And of course, that didn't even happen first. I could put it in a relay that controls lights, and that was the first idea. And they're like, "Okay, let's do that." Now what? What does that mean? What does that do? I don't know. Let's figure out what it was. Cart before the horse. Right. So not actually understanding why they ended up, what the value of the product was. Trust me, Echo had a very clear vision of the value of Alexa in your house before they launched it. Right. So two different types of marketing plans, and I think one spawns from very small bit company where they have an idea about a technology, they go out, they get venture capital money, they launch the technology, and stuff happens, right? Versus Amazon saying, I'm going after this market for this reason, and this is what I'm going to get out of it, and they do it, and it works. I think
Right.
that's kind of the two different.
So it's like, yeah, that actually kind of makes sense to me because, so the Alexas, the Google Homes, all of those, it's a super productized thing, right? And lighting controls, right? So if I'm John Smith Electric and I'm trying to understand, what is the thing that I'm selling, like I was asking earlier, that's not so we don't really have like a solution. I know you mentioned like Daintree and LG and Avion, and we'll have podcasts digging into all of this stuff deeper, but just from kind of like that top level of, okay, well, I understand what a networked control system is now and what it can do and the value of it. When and where does it make sense in my life as a contractor? If I'm going to go talk to a warehouse to upgrade their lighting to LED because that's where the industry's going, when does it make sense for connected lighting? And let's explore that a little bit because I don't think we've kind of nailed that down yet.
It doesn't always make sense because the customer isn't always looking for the best solution for their building.
Okay.
At the end of the day, we have to be honest with ourselves that when you approach a building owner or manager, they're a business, right? I mean, I think that's something that you have to be empathetic to the business that you're walking into, that they need to make payroll this month, right? They need to they need to support their marketing team to get that website launched, because, you know, their sales team is, you know, screaming at them. They can't sell without a website behind it. You know, they have real problems and real challenges that they're dealing with. They're in a building that they're trying to sell. They're trying to sell their business. I mean, there's so many things that you walking in and saying, "Hey, this is a no-brainer. What are you doing? You know, save this much money, no money out of your pocket, positive cash flow." I mean, it just becomes noise if you aren't empathetic to their business situation. You know, so telling a contractor, "Oh, you know, this is when you want to sell advanced controls," you know, when it's like this, and I mean, there's a million variables, right? So that's why that consultative sale, where you sit down with an end user and find out where they're at with their business, where they are in their growth cycle, if they're at a period where, you know, they're relatively their business is relatively stable, that they want to save money, but they also want to look into adding technology into their building. Not everybody wants to add technology into their building. You know, not everybody's going to put Echo in their house, right?
Sometimes they don't. I think you know, from my experiences, it seems like either sometimes a facility manager or a building owner was burned before by someone selling them some complicated thing that never worked correctly. Two, they just don't want the complexity. I mean, you know, lights go on with a switch, they go off with a switch. And why do they want to deal with some other, you know, network in their building? It's complicated. They don't know anything about it. And they just want to keep it simple.
So Tony, if
how you sell it, right? Maybe.
Quick question, Tony. So if I was an electrician who has no experience with network controls, what could I expect? Like, which type of devices would I have in hand? Would this come pre-commissioned? What would I need to expect for an installation?
Yeah, well, so I mean, I would say, you know, for an electrician, you know, the sensors, switches, and lights, you know, that's all basic stuff. I mean, they've had that before, and there just may be a little bit of extra tracking during the process of installation, whether that's stickers or following some kind of pre-plan on where things go.
So we're talking about existing devices that they're familiar with, just with software in them?
Yeah, they're just smarter, but from a physical standpoint, they look the same.
Okay.
And then you know, there's that, and then the only piece that they may not be that familiar with is the networking components of it, which may be a gateway or a router or something that looks like a hotspot, but it's not. But that same kind of device where you would install per floor in a building, and then there's Cat5 that has to be connected to each of those devices. That's pretty much it from an electrician standpoint. The networking configuration and all the setup and everything, that just comes from a company like us, who would set that up and support them throughout the process.
But I will tell you, you know, and this is something that's really important to be honest about. I think that we're in a position where we can be honest about it, because our livelihoods are not linked to someone buying advanced controls, no matter what, right? I think that, you know, we're in a situation where we do want to provide the right solution for the right person, and so, you know, and plus we've seen under the covers of most of these advanced control systems, and you know, have lived and breathed, you know, the ups and downs. This is technology. You know, right before we got on this podcast, I spent a half hour trying to get my computer to reboot because it needed to upload new software, right? I mean, you know, how often does your phone just like drop call? The other day I was trying to make a phone call, and my phone app, you know, now I have a phone app on my phone. Don't ask me how that works. And I'm trying to get it to actually dial, and the phone app is frozen. So my phone can't act like a phone because the phone app doesn't work on the phone, right? So I think for you know, me, I've become accustomed to technology creating delays and frustration in my life, and I think there's a lot of folks out there that gets translated over to their BMS, and they're like, there's no look. I've got this ancient 500-year-old BMS that I go out and I jumpstart every day, and I feed it oil throughout the day just to make sure that it's working. And you know what? I've figured out how to keep it from like breaking down on me, and I'm just going to keep that. If you're telling me that the thing that you're going to put in my building is controlled by a phone that I can't even make a phone call from because it's frozen right now, that's really scary, right? And that is real, man. This is technology. It's software based. I think that one of the biggest, and we'll get into this in another podcast, but one of the biggest mistakes that this industry made when they started deploying advanced controls 10, 12 years ago was they pretended like it was a set it and forget it, like it was an old aux sensor that was mounted on the wall. It just had some more intelligence. Like what Tony said, oh yeah, it's the same thing, it just has more intelligence. Mm-hmm. It's also software and firmware, and those get bugs and they stop communicating. I put this silly sign up on my TV. It took me a half hour because my computer couldn't connect wirelessly to the TV, right? And they're both brand new, for crying out loud. So don't think that that's not going to happen with your light fixture. That light fixture all of a sudden isn't communicating to the network for some reason. And what I see is that a facilities manager, and we've seen this a bunch, right, Tony, where a facilities manager goes and said, well, I'll fix that. Hold on, gets up on the ladder, goes up to the fixture, looks around, sees a button on there that says, push me. Don't know why it says push me, because you should never push that button, right? Push the button, the light fixture turns off, turns back on. Hey, all right, everybody cheers, we fixed it. No, you just kicked it off the network, and now it's going to be on 24/7. And you don't know because you leave at the end of the day, and nobody really sees that fixture not turning off, or whether. So now you do that to 50% of your fixtures, and now 50% of your fixtures are on at 100% 24/7. Now you're using more energy than you were before. So that happens. So these intelligent systems can save you a ton of money, but you need somebody who actually understands them, that's monitoring it and that's maintaining it. And there's a little bit of cost in that. It's nowhere near the cost that it's saving, but you have to look at that little portion and give it back. Like the angels share with whiskey. You're going to have to give a little bit back to get the good stuff. And so that's really important. Anybody that installs advanced controls, network controls, wireless controls, software-based controls, whatever you want us to call it, that doesn't have some kind of support package linked to it, you are asking for problems. And if you have that in your building and you don't think you have problems, you probably haven't looked at your system in a while.
Right. So, I mean, we're coming up on about the half hour mark, and we wanted to definitely keep these podcasts, about 30 minutes and whatnot. But I did want to take just a few minutes, because like Benjamin, your background is really, focused on sales and understanding these systems and helping educate end users on the benefits of them, and helping contractors be able to convey that to end users as well. As we look forward to our series of podcasts, what are some of the topics that you're going to explore with other industry professionals? Because we're looking at this as an opportunity for education and interviews and all kinds of chit chat. But
so I'd like we want to have guests, right? We want people from the industry to be able to join this conversation. Maybe they'll call in through video. We'll do some brief interviews. We'll put the titles, we'll include in the title the interview that we did in that podcast. We'll try to keep it to one, per podcast. But we'd like to interview, industry leaders, folks that are on the cutting edge, that are developing new technologies. We want to interview folks from governing body like the utilities, and from governing bodies like the DLC and the IES. So they can kind of chime in on what's interesting to them in this industry. But more than anything, we want to kind of ask the hard questions. I see a lot of marketing out there when people interview a controls manufacturer, a lighting manufacturer. It really is fluff. But where do you see the industry going? And tell us about how amazing your company is. You know what? I got some hard questions. I've lived and breathed a lot and bled a lot on projects. I want to know how these folks are dealing with some of the challenges that I'm seeing out there. And I think that they're going to know coming on here that we're going to ask some tough questions, and that in this setting, we're not trying to make any friends. You know, I'm not bringing you on here to get a plug. I'm bringing you on here because the industry wants to know, do you have the right stuff? And so that folks that end up watching this can hear honest answers from someone that's representing them. You know, if you're an end user, or you're a contractor, or you're somebody that's intimately connected to you know, how a project's going to end up, then we're representing you, and we're gonna let the industry come here and talk about the tough things that are going on these projects, and have us all be honest, and maybe they'll learn something. Maybe from these discussions they'll hear something that triggers them to go back to their R&D and do something special. So those interviews, I think, are going to be really important to us. We also want to be able to cover some of the really important topics that we're seeing in our daily base, you know, just our day-to-day work, because we're on projects every day where we are commissioning systems from across the industry. We're selling projects. So, you know, if we can talk about some of the projects that we've done, and how we sold them, or why they sold, to help others in the industry sell projects like this, fantastic. That, you know, if we could help one person sell one more project, that'd be amazing. So we can talk about ways that end users can, you know, in certain types of facilities, can glean value from these types of systems or projects, and that they can go back, you know, after watching one of our podcasts, and ask the consultant or the contractor that's working on their project, hey, I heard about this, and this. Can you look into this for me? And if it helps that person, then I think that would be a huge win for us. You know, the reality is, this industry has been really good to all of us. You know, I've been in this industry for over 20 years, and I started out as a contractor, and I've worked in all sides, from manufacturing, from lighting to controls to, you know, I've been a distributor, I've been an agent, I've been everything. And this industry is like a small little family. You know, we all help each other. So many of my competitors end up being my best customers, or an employee that I work for or works for me at some point. And so none of us it's a very friendly industry, and we all try to help each other. And I think at this point, where we sit with our company, we are trying to make a difference. We're trying to help everyone change and be able to adopt technology. So it's just a little kind of giving back that we want to do here, where we're taking off our, you know, SBT cap, even though I put it up there just to remind you guys, and say, let's just be honest. Let's say some things. It may even hurt us. You know, I'll be honest, and maybe something comes up and it's like, gosh, you know, that doesn't help us. If you guys figure that one out, we just made a competitor out of you. That's okay, right? Because we need more people in this industry doing this. It isn't, we're not going to win if there's just us. So anyway, so that's what this podcast is about. 20-30 minutes of sharing our thoughts. Yeah, like you've said, I've spent most of my life on the sales side, but plenty of it on the design and engineering side. Tony is our local software expert, our Zigbee expert, our wireless expert. So he knows more about that stuff than, you know, in his pinky, than I've ever known in my whole life. So, you know, having somebody that actually understands that, I think is going to be we're kind of opposites in that, you know, and so we can kind of bat each other around, and hopefully he calls me out when I'm trying to sell something, and I call him out when he's sounding, you know, too technical, and then you guys are here to keep us honest, you know.
That's the plan anyway, right? That is definitely the plan. So I mean, with that, I think that was actually a perfect summary, Benjamin. You know, we were gonna ask, you know, Tony, you know, what did he want to talk about on the podcast, but you did a perfect job summing it up. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in and joining us for the introductory podcast that we just recorded here, and look out for a ton more pieces of content that are going to be coming out, long form, like the content that you're viewing now. now, and shorter stuff, little segments of 2 minutes, 3 minutes, talking about some hot topics in the industry. So make sure you subscribe and follow us, and we look forward to seeing you back here soon. Thanks.
Let's do it.
Thank
Thanks
you.
everyone for joining.
Thank you.